the links Michel forged with the East. Mozambique's foreign policy has been more pragmatic than its internal programs. The Russians have not rescued Mozambique. Now it'll take help from anywhere. The red flag has been bleached white by the African sun over the wrecked administration building in Lilongwe, 10 miles from the Malawi border. 1,200 rebels passed this way, burning and killing 35 people. They broke into everything and took 800 hostages to carry away all that was of value. The army arrived the next day, but the town, like so many others, was stripped and deserted. Only the slogans were left. Lilongwe is now derelict. There's no petrol, no transport, and nowhere to go. It can only be reached by air. This is the land of the famine, a green and fertile place. A land of impassable roads and abandoned fields, scourged by war. On the ground, hundreds of villages have been abandoned. More than 1 million people have just fled into the bush. More refugees here than in the whole of the First World War. These orphans are safe for now. They're in a village close to an army garrison that's not yet been attacked and where refugees can stop long enough to plant a few crops. The kind of place the aid workers and the government can reach. But at every turn, every project, every policy, every initiative runs up against the war. Nothing conclusive can be done for Mozambique until the fighting stops. Until then, all anybody can do is work on the margins of Mozambique's misery. At the Villa Paradise, Bettino has been noticed. His mother is dead. He too is now an orphan, lost and bewildered. One of 100 tragedies a day here, where help has so far been too little and often too late. So near to the capital of Zambezia, but there's no medical help here, not enough food, not enough clothing for the naked and the starving. Perhaps because we were there, Bettino and Rabia were given special treatment. There was no time to comfort them in their grief, just enough to strip them of their rags and clean them up. Nearly all the children here are hungry and have no clothes. Once they've been rubbed down with cold water, these two will get a meal and something to wear. After that, with Mozambique the way it is, who knows what will happen to them, 2 orphans among so many. There is some attempt to process the refugees here. The struggle is to get your name on somebody's list. Only then do you stand a chance of a handout. Aid workers are making difficult choices of life and sometimes death. This is the cutting edge of Mozambique's disaster. As yet, only a handful of people here get anything at all.
It's obviously a dramatic situation. A lot of people have arrived. They've been living lives of misery, either behind MNR lines or living wild in the bush like animals for months and months, some of them for nearly a year. People are incredibly vulnerable. There's a certain amount of disease, respiratory disease. You can hear people coughing. You can see that a lot of the children have swollen bellies. People are sick. People are traumatized.
This is not Ethiopia, though the results sometimes look the same. This is a disaster created by man. The fickle weather has merely made it worse. The people have been reduced to beggary because their country has been brutalized by 25 years of a war nobody can stop. The baby is starving. The mother is only 30 years old. She's reached the uttermost limits of exhaustion. They've lost everything and everybody they had. They can't run anymore. They found a refuge, but not help. This is the reality of Mozambique.
That report by Michael Burke of the BBC. The United States is among the Western countries trying to help Mozambique. Judy Woodruff has more on that story. Judy?
The point man in the Reagan administration for dealing with Mozambique is Chester Crocker. He has been Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs since 1981. Mr. Secretary, that was a terribly depressing report. Is the situation as bad as it appears to be there?
Mozambique has faced a series of natural and man-made disasters for some years now, but there can be no question that the situation is indeed grave, is tragic, and is a real humanitarian disaster. As we sit here this evening in Mozambique, there can be no question of that.
What is the United States doing to help?
Well, we are providing the international leadership for the immediate humanitarian relief effort. It was our country which called for the appointment of a UN coordinator to bring about a conference for maximizing contributions from all over the international community to get the necessary food and other kinds of relief, medical relief and so forth, into Mozambique. There now is in place a UN food coordinator in Maputo. Secondly, we recently saw held in Geneva a large pledging conference that flowed out of that exercise, which led to contributions of something on the order of $200 million in food pledges that are now in the process of being delivered. We are providing $75 million of that total.
And how much of a dent is all that making?
Well, it'll make a big dent as it gets delivered and as it gets distributed. Of course, the key is we're talking about a country whose infrastructure has been very severely damaged and is deteriorating again as we sit here as a result of the war.
Meaning the roads to get the trucks, the roads, and so forth.
Yes, and the organizations to deliver it and the necessary coordinating mechanisms, because there are many people who are seeking to help. I would point out that there are many American private voluntary organizations that are involved on the ground in Mozambique and have been now for 2 or 3 years. They will play a strong role. Our aid mission on the ground will play a strong role. The UN has a vital role to play in terms of coordination. We wish that everybody would contribute more, and we're doing a great deal ourselves. We are the largest single coordinator to Mozambique. The irony of this situation, if I may just carry on for a moment, is that here's a country which started out its independent life closely aligned with the Soviet Union. At this recent Geneva conference that I referred to, the Soviets pledged the grand total of $282,000 towards this target of over $200 million. The Mozambicans have learned this lesson, and they are moving rapidly towards broadening their relationships with the West, because they know that's where their future lies.
They're moving away from socialism. Of course, they don't have much of an economy of any sort to speak of now. How much of a problem is the war? I mean, it appears to be the major cause of what is of the situation as it's deteriorated. Well, the civil war I'm talking about.
There are 3 factors. I think the war is in many respects the most important because of the displaced people, because of the rebel attacks on infrastructure, on routes for transport and that kind of thing, which leads to a compounded problem. You also have, in some parts of Mozambique, a drought, particularly in the north. And thirdly, you have a legacy now of some years of government policies which have not encouraged production. That has begun to change, and Mozambique now has in place, with the IMF and the World Bank, one of the most dramatic policy reform programs of any country in Africa, but it's not yet produced those results. So the combination is what we see on the TV.
Well, much of the, as we know, as was reported in this piece, the rebels, the Renamo, are supported in large part by the South African government. Does the United States approve of that?
Good heavens, no. We helped to bring about a situation where the Mozambique government would reach out to all of its neighbors to try and find a basis for coexistence with those neighbors, including especially South Africa. South Africa signed an agreement with Mozambique back in 1984 to respect its territorial integrity, its frontiers, and to desist from such kinds of support. I regret to say it is our impression that the South African government maintains a pattern of communication with and support to the Renamo resistance.
And what is the United States able to do anything in terms of persuading the South Africans to change their policy?
Well, South Africa is some 8,000 miles away, and it is a sovereign country. They know exactly how we feel about this, and we've made our views very clear for a number of years now. And there can be no doubt in South African minds where this country stands on that issue. That said, we also have taken note of the fact that the South African government itself has said it wishes to continue to adhere to this agreement that I referred to. So perhaps the real question is, would the real South African government please stand up?
But the result is that they're still supporting the rebels, and the war continues, and the famine gets worse. Isn't that Is that a correct perception?
Well, that you have a dynamic situation. The war has its ebbs and flows, and it's unclear how to predict it, say, a year from now or 2 years from now. It is our impression that the international community, by which I mean our Western allies, virtually all the neighboring countries in Black Africa, are determined to lend their support to the government of President Chissano, and at the same time, obviously would encourage any chance for peace to break out. But this is an internal situation inside Mozambique.
What do you think ought to be done? I mean, you know, from where you sit, what ought to be done to get, you know, to bring Mozambique to a peaceful solution?
Well, we feel that all of Mozambique's neighbors should respect Mozambique's tragedy and give Mozambique a chance to get back on its feet. And we have worked hard to bring about that result. Secondly, we feel that Mozambique needs support at this tragic time. We are providing as much support as any Western country, as any country internationally. And I might say we're doing so in the context of the Western Alliance, which is doing this in parallel with us.
Are we doing enough, do you think?
Well, it's hard to say when you see films like that you can say you're doing enough. We must do all that is necessary, and the president, our president, has said that there can be no question here. We do support the government of President Chissano. We had his predecessor here for a very successful visit with the president back in the fall of 1985. Hungry babies know no politics. We must get food to all those in need throughout that country, and we're going to do everything we can to see that that happens.
And do you think the government of South Africa appreciates that as well?
I can't speak for the government of South Africa.
Okay. Well, Mr. Secretary, we appreciate your being with us.
Thank you.